Welcome back. What's good, homies? Welcome back to the Drafts and Draughts podcast. I'm Joe, aka Sultan. No Dave tonight, so solo show. It's Wednesday, October 23rd, and we are halfway through the fantasy football season. And today, I'm going to be taking you through a re-rank of our Dynasty QB rankings. So what I'm hoping to do is we've seen half the season. We had our preseason Dynasty rankings. Some of it's changed. Some of it stayed the same. Let's start talking about it. But before we get to a draft review, I got some exciting news. I'm pumped to announce our second official partnership or sponsorship with a company called Betstamp by way of Sign Up Expert. This partnership should open up an incredible opportunity for you to join some of the most reputable sports books, secure the best odds, and even get your hands on some new user offers. Not only that, it gives you, our favorite listener, a unique opportunity to help support us over here at the Drafts and Draughts podcast so we can keep pumping out our coveted midseason Dynasty rankings along with your favorite podcast content. Now, I have to admit, even though I am not a sports bettor at heart, I found this process to be incredibly easy to use. And once I familiarized myself with each sports book, I was able to place a few bets. And just last night, I was able to place a 14 parlay for this weekend that should help finance my next golf trip. Or at the very least, should help me tap into some new brews for the draft reviews. Hey, Sultan, this sounds great. How do I sign up? It's a great question. Let me explain. First, you're going to want to navigate over to our dedicated page over at signupexpert.com/DD, where you're going to land on a landing page equipped with our selection of sportsbooks, along with some sportsbooks selected by our partners at Betstamp that are specifically tailored to your region. Each sportsbook will have a unique offering bundled with its respective sign-up. Click the sportsbook you want to sign up for and try, follow the instructions, and make your deposit. Then you're ready to go. So if you're ready to take your sports betting to the next level and want to help support the Drafts and Draughts podcast, I would be forever thankful if you sign up for the next sportsbook through my Sign Up Expert link, which I'll be sure to include in the podcast description in the video. With that being said, it's now time for the draft review. So solo draft reviews are never fun. I have nobody to share the crack opening with, but what I have for you guys today is the Cold Harbor Brewing Co. Juice Freak, which is a New England IPA. And if you've been listening all along, you know that I'm a freak in the spreadsheets for a juice freak. I don't know where I was going with that. Yeah, it's a 6.5% ABV. Yeah, I don't know anything else. Let's give it a crack. Oh, I can't even get into the... Are you kidding me? There we go. Sorry, a little technical difficulties with the can. Oh, it's so much better than the last one. I think the last one we reviewed was a 2.5. That one had some juice to it. When I say so much better, I mean, it's still not that, nothing compares to the tree houses we were reviewing early in the season. So I'm going to give this one a flat out 3. Better than the last one I reviewed, but still not quite an amazing beer. So let me get this poured, and I'm going to lay out for you what the OTQ or the one tough question was that I'm going with today. So the OTQ for today was studs or streams. When it comes to one-off positions like tight end and quarterback, how do you like to play fantasy football? Do you like to go after the studs at your position? Go get your Lamars, go get your former Cam Newton types, go get your Andrew Luck, go get your Gronk or your Kelsey or your, this year I guess would be Bowers. Or do you like to do the stream route where you go navigate the waiver wire, play the best matchups for all the positions, lurk and search for that late ADP stud a la Sam Laporta last year or Jane Daniels this year? I guess I'll go first. But while you guys are thinking about it, I guess I've always been a punt quarterback and tight end player in fantasy football as far back as I've ever played, just like I have always been that way in baseball. I've always been a punt catcher type player. I've always felt like no matter how good the catcher position was, it still gave you a fraction of the production that you got at every other position. And the marginal return on your Buster Posey or your JT Realmuto or whoever that catcher was over the number 2 catcher wasn't enough to make up for all of the production you were losing across the board in those early round picks. And that's kind of how I've always been with quarterback and tight end. Definitely with quarterback. And the only tight end I ever took early was Gronk because I'm a Patriots fan. And he was giving you wide receiver 1 numbers, but I was never a Kelsey bag holder. I was never a bag holder, a Kelsey truther. But I will say I'm starting to come around on elite QB uh, because I think they are more consistent because they are touching the ball in every play. Um, that admittedly, I am a Lamar holder. I've had Lamar in my 1QB Dynasty League with Dave in the PDFDL. I've been a Lamar holder for the last 6 seasons. So I've gotten to see the highs and lows of owning Lamar, which is you get your elite MVP seasons a couple times, but you also get him banged up with shoulder, hamstring, ankle injuries periodically, and you end up having to stream quarterback anyways. So I'm thinking at a position like quarterback where they're touching the ball every game and the consistency they actually give you when they are that elite quarterback who has no threat of losing their job or losing their security, like your Josh Allen type, like your looks like Jalen Hurts, like looks like Lamar, formerly Cam Newton, Andrew Luck. I kind of mentioned him already. They give you consistent production above and beyond every other player in the game. Unlike catcher, where you were looking at, okay, the best catchers were still a fraction as good as the other positions. The best quarterbacks give you almost double some of the best running backs and wide receivers aside from the top ones. And they're still, 20 to 30% more productive than the best wide receivers. I think Lamar is averaging something like 25 points per game this season. Obviously, that's probably not going to continue, but he should settle in around 22 to 24. And the best receiver might settle. I guess CeeDee Lamb was 24 last year. So maybe I'm making shit up. I don't know. It just feels like the production at quarterback can be far and away above the others. And I'm starting to come around on in one quarterback. I don't know how much I'm going to pay for them, but the idea of securing that top quarterback feels like it is something I think gives you some value. Whereas at tight end, I'm still always have been and still am of the opinion that they are still so inconsistent on a week to week basis and even sometimes season to season basis, unless you have Kelsey, Andrews, or hopefully Bowers. Like we saw a few years ago, Dalton Schultz was like tight end 3. We saw, years ago, Evan Engram was tight end, 6. We've seen Kyle Rudolph types and Eric Ebron and Kobe Fleener and you name it. There's so many tight ends that come and go season to season, and then definitely on a week to week basis. If you're not putting up a touchdown, they're almost used. Look at Sam Laporta this year. Look at Dalton Kincaid. Look at Kyle Pitts. Look at Mark Andrews. They've all had multiple weeks where they've been downright unplayable, and they're all the elites of the elites. So when we get to the tight end rankings, we'll probably talk about it a little bit further. I don't know if I'm going to get to it before week 8 starts. Maybe it'll be a week 8 update. But that's my answer. If you have a different answer, leave it in the comments. I'm happy to go through and read about it. I would love to get some more activity on the channel. So if you're listening, you got this far, please leave a comment on YouTube. Please like the channel. I think it's really helpful, and it makes me feel like you guys really care what I have to say. Whether you do or not, just fake it for me, please. We love a faker. So let's move on to the Dynasty QB rankings. And before we get to the tier list and the rankings list, I just want to talk a little bit about, why Dynasty QB rankings are so different from all the other positions. I think it's the only position in all of fantasy sports, or at least fantasy football for sure. I'm not as close to basketball and hockey, and so I don't want to make that sweeping statement, but it's the only position where a good real life skill set doesn't always translate to good fantasy production. Whereas for the most part, you would say most really good NFL wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends. I guess tight ends is kind of the same because they can be good blockers, but most really productive quarterbacks don't necessarily translate to being good fantasy quarterbacks. Look at like Matthew Stafford. He's been one of the best quarterbacks in football for the last 15 years. And yet I would be hard pressed to guess he's ever been highly rated as a fantasy asset. I mean, there was a period of time where he was a quarterback 1. I don't think he's ever been in contention for QB1 overall. He was playing during the Mike Vick days. I think maybe he was playing during the Andrew Luck and Cam Newton days. He was playing during the RG3 era and the Drew Brees, Peyton Manning era. Like those prolific passers. Tom Brady probably was in the same boat, to be honest, where uh, just because you're a good real life quarterback doesn't mean you're a great fantasy quarterback. And inversely, look at guys like just because you're a great fantasy asset doesn't mean you're a great real life quarterback, which I think is really important when you're evaluating dynasty quarterback values and rankings. Like look at Justin Fields. Every year he's been a starter. He's been a top 8 option. Look at Anthony Richardson. He's been a top 5 to 10 option almost every time he's started and finished a game. But they are atrocious real life quarterbacks to the point where you can't count on them being a starter for much longer than when you have them right now, which makes it really hard to rank them, especially midseason. We're looking at fantasy production versus dynasty value. You're going to see it more when we get to the running backs and wide receivers. We have injuries where it's like, how do you rank a guy like Derrick Henry, who should be potentially running back one the rest of the season, versus his dynasty ranking in a startup draft in the offseason where he might be a 10th round pick? Um, but so I think it's important when evaluating dynasty QBs. I tend to lean on the side of never wanting to need to pay up for quarterback, especially in a super flex format. So I actually kind of value stability a little bit more and longevity a little bit more, knowing that I'll take the guy who looks like he's a surefire franchise quarterback like Stroud, who should be around for a while, over the prolific upside quarterback like Fields or Richardson, for the sheer fact that, yeah, I know on a weekly basis that Richardson and Stroud are both starting. I bet you the variances on the bell curve of uh, Richardson's outcomes are probably higher skewed than Stroud's, but I bet you Stroud has a longer career and therefore is a better fantasy asset, a dynasty asset. Um, in one quarterback where you're going to have one or two quarterbacks on your bench that can fill in the case of a player getting demoted, benched, injured, I might be more apt to say I'll go for that elite upside in a guy like Daniels, Lamar. It's Josh Allen versus the stability of a guy like, maybe a Joe Burrow or whoever. I mean, I guess Allen's a bad example. He's been such a great quarterback for so long, but same with Lamar. But you know what I'm saying? Like the archetype of a player who seems like a prolific fantasy scorer versus a great real life NFL quarterback. Um, but let's move on to the quarterback rankings. And my dynasty, let me share my screen. And so we got our tier list here for quarterbacks. So we're going to go on to S tier. And keep in mind, we're doing tiered rankings, which means if guys are in the same tier, I don't care what order you put them in. I have a particular order that I'm going to put them in. Does not mean that I think that Lamar is worth significantly more than Josh Allen. I'm just going to put him at QB1 because he's putting up the best quarterback season I've ever seen in my lifetime right now. I'm going to put Allen at QB2 because he's been fantastic. But just to show that I'm not going to let 7 games influence my entire thought process, the last player I'm going to leave in the S tier elite studs is Patrick Mahomes. So Lamar's QB1. He's averaging, like I said, 25 points per game right now. And he has 2 near 40-point, basically week winning performances within his first 7 games. He's a full year younger than Allen, and his ceiling is on display right now. He's evolved as a passer. I think he belongs at QB1 over Allen. That's not to say Allen isn't deserving of the spot, but Lamar has an 88 PFF grade. It's number 1 in the NFL right now. He's the only quarterback in the NFL with a less than 1% turnover worthy play rate. He's showcasing his ability as a passer, which should lengthen his career. For the only former concern about Lamar was that being a mobile run first quarterback, when that threat of mobility goes away and that threat of taking off and running at any time goes away, does that limit his viability as an NFL quarterback because defenses can game plan for him as solely a passer? And I think he's showing right now that it doesn't matter. I think he's 27 years old, I think. 27, going to be 28 going for next year's season. Prime of your career as a quarterback. Hard for me to have anybody else but Lamar at QB1. Um, Moving on to Josh Allen, he's putting up quietly one of his best seasons ever. He has no interceptions through 7 weeks. He's also top of the league in big time throw rate and near the top in almost every PFF passing grade, whether it's standard PFF passing grade or PFF grade on passes over 20 yards, PFF passing grade under pressure. He's been a absolute monster, and he's still picking up those goal line touchdowns. He's still that stubborn, give me the rock, but also got that dog in him, give me the rock quarterback that I think I would love to obviously have anchoring my squad. And if you have Allen on your team and one quarterback, you're a threat to be a um, championship caliber team at almost any time. Now, the last player I have in this tier is Patrick Mahomes, and we all know the story right now. Came into the season expecting to have a wide receiver core of Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, and then an aging Travis Kelce at tight end as the potentially second or third option in an offense that, with that core, should have ran so well. With Isaiah Pacheco taking some pressure off the passing game and creating play action opportunities, this team should have been an absolute juggernaut. They lose Hollywood Brown in the preseason. They lose Rashee Rice in week 3. Xavier Worthy, albeit a good prospect, is clearly not picking up much of, or not being assigned much of the playbook beyond screen routes and deep routes. He's not getting that intermediate level route tree to the point where they're relying so much on Kelce, who we've seen has literally no yak ability left. He's no longer shifty and mobile. He's getting separation, but not at the same clip he was in his prime or even last year. Uh, I don't know what to really think of Mahomes. He's averaging something like 14 points per game in your 4-point passing touchdown leagues. Also, that defense is so good. They're not under pressure to air it out ever. They're never trailing. They're never in shootouts. But in Dynasty, I just could never fade a guy like Mahomes, who's an MVP caliber quarterback, who should give you at least 5+ more seasons of production that has an elite ceiling we've all seen. We know he has it in him. And that's the type of quarterback that I know will be anchoring my squad for years to come. Now, he's the type of guy I'd like to pair with a guy like Richardson. So that, hey, Richardson sucking, sputtering, ends up getting assigned to the bench like a Justin Fields type. Perfect. I have my Mahomes type to weather the growing pains while I let a QB prospect develop. Because I think you're never worried about Mahomes as your QB1 losing his job. The last one we have here isn't in S tier, but I think is worth talking about. And I have him at the first one in the A tier studs is Jaden Daniels. I think a lot of people are ready to crown him the next big thing, move him up to QB into the S tier for sure, and able to maybe crown him as QB1. And I think he's fantastic. He's showcased everything he was praised for his last year at LSU, which was obviously winning a Heisman. That he was more than just a rushing quarterback, had more than just that stable rushing floor that a Konami code quarterback gives you, but that he can make all the passes. I will say it's been 7 games. We've seen quite a few players come into the league and have very good stretches over small sample sizes. Look at Will Levis's start last year. First thing that comes to mind. Look at Robert Griffin III when he had his first game on the season, had a full fantastic season. I know he was hampered by injuries, but we are seeing a Jaden Daniels injury in his 7th game of the season, which one of the major concerns with Daniels was that he was a little bit reckless when he took off running and took some unnecessary big shots. I want to see how a guy like Daniels handles adversity and how the Commanders handle him under adversity. We saw the way Bryce Young got benched after a couple games this season. We've seen the way guys like Levis are being given a short leash. I mean, granted, he's a way better prospect than Levis, but still, you see how when a quarterback's doing well, when a team's doing well, they're obviously everything's hunky-dory in the locker room and in the general manager's room and in the coach's room. When things aren't going well, what are the coaches going to start questioning him? Is he going to start doubting himself? Is there going to be pressure? I don't know. We haven't seen him struggle yet. Not saying, I want to see him do poorly so I can evaluate if he's good or not. It sounds kind of counterintuitive, but if he ever does struggle, I still need to see how does he come out, because we've seen Mahomes have bad stretches and come out of it on top. We've seen Brady have bad stretches where, notoriously, I think it was the Max Kellerman from Around the Horn was like, "Yep, Tom Brady's washed," and then he went on to put up like 8 more MVP caliber seasons. So he's going to have bad stretches, and how does he respond? The other thing I think is worth noting is I saw some highlights on Twitter. They showcased Jaden Daniels' passing tree, showing where he's completing and throwing passes to, and it was like 85% to the right side of the field, which shows me one of two things. I think we talked about this recently. It was like one of two things. One, they're clearly limiting his basically limiting him to one read and get and throw the ball away, or hit his first read and keep a second. Very safe passing tree, which some can say, wow, so he can't make all the throws. Like that's alarming. That could be game planned out of his playbook. The other thing that I think could be is why make all the throws if you don't need to, and or why put a lot of pressure on Jaden Daniels to make all these difficult throws as a rookie? Why not give him a safe route tree to pass to, and then incrementally add in more difficult throws, different locations, different timing, different rhythm, different play action looks, different, I don't even know, personnel packages. I don't really have a lot other to say, but he's the first player in my A tier, my studs tier. I'm going to add the rest of them in all at once, and I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I am going to talk about some of them. So the rest of the tier after Jaden Daniels is for my quarterbacks 4 through 10 is Daniels, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, Caleb Williams, Jordan Love, and CJ Stroud. So looking through this, I think the next one I want to talk about is Joe Burrow. So Burrow has obviously overcome some injury issues within the last year. Missed half the season last year, tore his ACL a couple years ago, still dealing with the aftermath of that wrist injury this season. We've all seen the clips on Twitter, the highlights of him flexing his hand, trying to get a grip on the ball in the cold weather, yada, yada, yada. But Burrow's been sneakily good. He's put up 19 points per game. That's good for a top 6 quarterback, I think, right now in the fantasy season, excluding Russell Wilson's 1-game performance. And he's been a top 5 quarterback in almost every metric that we expect from him as a real life passer. 86 PFF grade, which is number 3, a 70 PFF grade versus pressure, which is number 2 on the year, and a 93 PFF grade on deep passes, which is also number 2 on the year. Now, it's important to note that he's clearly been a better quarterback since T. Higgins has returned to the lineup, since he's averaged over 22 points per game since T. Higgins got back in the lineup. Now, this will be very important to keep this in mind. If T leaves, if they don't kill him, if T leaves, that may present an opportunity for a sell high window on Burrow. I assume if T. Higgins leaves, they're not just going to go into the 2025 season without replacing him. But just food for thought. He's, not only does Chase seem to have down weeks when T. Higgins isn't playing, Burrow does as well. Excuse me. What I like about Joe Burrow is he's clearly a dominant, successful NFL quarterback. And I think that's really important for evaluating your dynasty QB value. Is just, like I said before, does this player have the potential to be a quarterback 3 to 5 years from now? I know that we play this game in such short windows of 1 to 2 years, and not every dynasty lasts that long, but this position is so hard to get right. I don't want to be chasing the next Darnold, Zach Wilson, Josh Rosen, Kenny Pickett. I don't want to be squandering my first round picks on quarterbacks. I want to be saving my first round picks and going to pick up the positions that I think are a little bit easier to hit than trying to find the next quarterback and having so many whiffs. And I think Joe Burrow fits that mold of a quarterback I think I can count on for the next 5 years. He is 27, going to be 28 next year, same exact age as Lamar. So keep that in mind. He's not exactly on the younger side of quarterbacks, but he's certainly not 30 yet, which I think is the age where QB value starts to kind of fall off a little bit. The next guy I think is exciting, the one who moved up into tier 2 for us, is Jordan Love. He's been averaging 20.6 points per game, which also is a top 5 quarterback, and he just looks the part. He's got all the arm strength. He's clearly willing to take shots downfield. He clearly elevates all of the players around him. I don't think anybody's looking at a wide receiver room of Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, and Dontavian Wicks and going, wow, he has just this elite supporting cast. I think it's quite the opposite. I think Jordan Love is elite, and I think he's elevating all of those players. The Packers did it again. They went from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love. And if you're a Bears fan, you've just got to be on suicide watch for the rest of your life because that franchise just hasn't missed. And you have been waiting for the day to dance on the grave of Packers fans. And it just doesn't seem like you're going to get that chance. And the crazy thing about Jordan Love is he's got, you know, the devil of, the voice of reason of Aaron Rodgers on his left shoulder and the voice of the devil and Brett Favre on his right shoulder. One's encouraging him to make that risky throw and make that throw into traffic between 3 defenders to a receiver who's not even looking yet. And then on the other hand, you have the Rodgers on the other shoulder saying, make that throw off your back foot towards the sideline, that safe catch pass that only your receiver can make. And he's making both throws. And it's crazy to see. I wanted to believe him out of this tier because I just don't want to put him up here, but I can't. I can't deny how good he's been. He's elevating that entire receiver core, putting up 20 points per game. He has that mobile floor. I think he belongs. The other guy here that I think is interesting to talk about is CJ Stroud. I think we all came into the season putting him in our top 6 as a rookie who put up the season he did last year. We said he's only going to get better from here, right? Maybe not. Stroud's been averaging 15 points per game in 4-point pass leagues, coming off I think an 86 pass yard performance against the Packers last week, was just not what you expect out of your QB1. You never expect an 86 yard pass effort in a loss. I can see a situation where the Texans get a couple defensive touchdowns, a kick return touchdown. They just decide to sit on the lead and run the ball a lot, and Stroud doesn't put up passing stats. Yep, that happens. In a game where they lost, where they scored a combined 40-something points, it's really weird to see the fact that he only had 80-something passing yards. All I can think is he struggling without Nico Collins? I find it hard to believe because Nico missed some time last year and he didn't miss a beat, and they have Stephon Diggs this year. So I don't quite know what's wrong or why he's been so down this year, but I think being non-mobile makes him have a Mahomes-esque floor that we're seeing this year out of Mahomes. And to me, but it's even worse than that, putting up 5, 6-point outings and 8-point outings. I think that makes it hard for us to trust him in that S tier, elite tier. I think even in the A tier, I'd have a hard-pressed time. I think there's a chance he ends up leveling off as more of your Jared Goff plus type, or your Justin Herbert plus, although Herbert put up a 23-point per game season, so it's hard to say, but a Trevor Lawrence plus. I don't know. It's too early to say. I'm not willing to move anybody dramatically in either direction. The only one I've really made a huge dramatic pivot on was Jaden Daniels. And that wasn't I was the one shouting from the rooftops that Jaden Daniels and Anthony Richardson belonged to be back-to-back in preseason rankings. They both should have been a 2-3 startup pick in Superflex. The last guy in this tier that I want to talk about, I know I just said that about Stroud, but I skipped over one guy, which is Kyler Murray. He moved up to tier 2. I think we had him fringe tier 2 last time we did this, and I just think he's averaging 18 points per game in a run-first offense so far. Clearly, the scheme's a little weird. They're not really throwing the intermediate ball. It's either home runs or dump offs, or he takes off and runs. But he's showing his ability on the ground to score as good as anybody in the NFL, as good as Lamar, as good as Richardson. He's a year plus removed from the ACL surgery now, and he's put up multiple 40-plus yard touchdown runs. I don't know if any other quarterback has put up a 40-plus yard run this season. I think Lamar might have had one. And I think Lamar had one called back because of penalty. And his passing has been above average. Nothing spectacular, but he's got a 74 PFF passing grade, which is 10th in the NFL, top third. A 68 PFF passing grade versus pressure is third in the NFL. Now, that's really good. I don't know if that factors out scrambles or not, because clearly when he's under pressure, if he's not passing it and getting scrambling and gaining 3 yards, that's a good thing, but it's certainly not showcasing his ability to beat pressure by passing. Whereas taking a sack or throwing it away would hurt your passing grade. So I don't hard for me to quantify that, but he's certainly not looking terrible in those two aspects. And his pressure to sack rate is top 10. So I'm wondering if this lack of passing volume is just been a victim of the game scripts where they've gotten blown out one game, they've had a blowout one game, they've had James Conner has been lighting it up. They've had some kick return touchdowns, or at least one. I know DJ Dallas had one. I wonder if he's just been a victim of circumstance. I don't know. I'm willing to move him up here and say, I mean, he's shown he has the rushing ability we all want out of our QB ones. And his PFF passing grades show that he should be able to be a mainstay franchise quarterback for years to come. I'm not ready to give up on Kyler Murray. Obviously not. I'm having the A tier. I don't know why I said that, but so I moved him in the A tier for that reason. I don't care how small he is or how short he is. He's the type of quarterback that I think can lead a dynasty team, certainly a one quarterback team. And he's somebody I like to pair with a safer asset like a Goff type or, a Derek Carr. I don't know Derek Carr, but Kirk Cousins in Superflex. So let's move on to our next tier, which is my B tier of potential studs. In this tier, I have Drake May, Brock Purdy, Trevor Lawrence, and Justin Herbert. These guys are all 26 years old or younger. May is 22, Brock Purdy is 24, Trevor Lawrence is 25, and Justin Herbert is 26. They have, and I know May is a small sample size, but he was a better prospect than CJ Stroud. He was a better prospect than Anthony Richardson. He was a better prospect than Bryce Young. I don't know if he was on par, was not on par with Trevor Lawrence, but he was one of the best prospects we've seen in a while at quarterback besides Caleb Williams. And he's come in, made 2 starts behind a horrible offensive line and put up 20 points per game. Were they garbage time? Is he a garbage time merchant or is he the real deal? I guess it remains to be seen, but he looks the part. He's making all the throws as a rookie. He's completed 2 40-plus yard passes already in his short stint as the NFL starter in a dysfunctional Patriots offense, whose wide receiver 1 was drafted in the 6th round last year, and he ran a 4.5 in Kayshon Boutte. They should get a top pick in the 2025 rookie draft, NFL draft, which should give them either one bona fide blue chip asset or the ability to trade down and collect multiple assets to build around Drake May, which is why I'm willing to put him in the top of this B tier. And I think by the end of the year, you could see him move into the middle of this A tier because he is only 22 years old and the hype will get out of control if people see that what he's doing on a limited offense. Imagine what he does if they do surround him with some talent. They do go sign T. Higgins. They do draft Ted McMillan in the middle of the top 10 picks after trading down from the 101, or they do go, Jalen Polk and Demario Douglas start to come along towards the end of the season. I think he's got that combination of mobility, arm strength, and seemingly the ability to read the field that you look for out of your QB1, where you could see that he has that Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes ceiling. Now, he very well could be Sam Darnold or Zach Wilson, but I think he's already shown more than they ever showed in their rookie seasons in just 2 games. I did hear a stat legitimately like a half hour ago that was that Drake May's scramble rate in college was even higher than that of Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts and Jordan Love and Jane Daniels. He's scrambled at a level commensurate with the best rushing quarterbacks, the best fantasy rushing quarterbacks we've ever seen in the NFL. So I think there's nothing but room for improvement in May's profile, and there may be some lumps along the way, especially given that Patriots supporting cast, but I find it hard not to have him at least at, as a top 12 quarterback. Next one here is Brock Purdy. I wish Dave was here so he could, remove him from his mouth, but we're starting to see some cracks in Brock Purdy's armor. I guess we saw him as this guy who could make all the timing throws, wasn't necessarily the most gifted physical quarterback, but he had all the ability to make anticipation throws and make accurate throws and run an offense in a way that could lead them to a Super Bowl. But I'm starting to wonder if he's showing his true colors with all of his all pro options in CMC, Ayuk, Debo, etc. are all injured. Are we starting to see that Brock Purdy is more of a fraud and he's nothing more than just, Bryce Young without, with fancy options? That might be a stretch, but I still have him as a top 12 quarterback. So clearly, I don't think that, but just narrowly ahead of Trevor Lawrence and Justin Herbert, who I think Trevor Lawrence was the prince that was promised. He was supposed to be the next big thing. And I think we're starting to see that some of those highlight clips of Trevor Lawrence making all the throws that were getting dropped in the end zone last year are coming to light again this year. I think there was a game earlier this year where the Jaguars dropped 4 touchdowns or 4 passes in the end zone that were clear drops. I think Brian Thomas had 2 and Gabe Davis had 2. Maybe Christian Kirk had 1 also. To the point where it's like, man, is he just throwing the ball a funky way? Is it wobbling too much? He's throwing too hard? I don't know what to make of it, but the guy clearly has arm strength. The guy clearly has natural ability. I just don't know if he has the killer instinct that we expect out of a quarterback, especially given how good they looked at some points last year and how bad they finished and how bad the Jaguars looked this year. You can't blame it all on how poor that defense is or how poor that supporting cast is. Brian Thomas looks like a superstar. So to say that, T-Law just doesn't have the support around him, I think that's just wrong. I mean, Evan Ingram's a top 8 tight end. Last one here is Justin Herbert. I think he's a really good buy low candidate. I don't think you're ever going to get that production level you got out of his rookie and sophomore year where he was scoring 20 to 25 points per game, at least as long as Harbaugh is coaching there. I think you're always going to see a slow-paced game, a very few amount of plays. They're going to run the ball. They're going to shorten the game. They're going to make it a hard-hitting affair. But Herbert's still young enough and talented enough where in the event that they start finding themselves that recipe isn't working, I think Harbaugh is talented enough of a head coach to put together a game plan for the passing attack to be good. And I think you could see the Chargers, if they ever do get a new number 1 target. I think McConkey profiles as a fantastic number 2. I think QJ profiles as a fantastic sacrificial X receiver, to quote Matt Harmon. Or use QJ almost in a gadget / deep role, kind of similar to the way Worthy is being used right now in Kansas City. I think they really need that true alpha outside X receiver, like your Nico Collins type, to truly unlock Justin Herbert. Now it sounds like, it's not exactly that easy, but it's not that hard to find that archetype of player. And I think if anyone's going to unlock that ability again, it would be a coach like Harbaugh. So that's my top 13 dynasty quarterbacks. To read them back to you, I have Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes are in my S tier. My next tier is Jaden Daniels, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, Caleb Williams, Jordan Love, and CJ Stroud. That's my 4 through 10. And then my 11 through 13 are Drake May, Brock Purdy, Trevor Lawrence, and Justin Herbert in my B tier. So just rattle off a few more that I had in the next tier. I had Anthony Richardson at 14. I had Baker Mayfield at 15. I had Dak Prescott at 16. I had Jared Goff at 17. Where is he? Jared Goff at 17. And then after that, there's really nobody else I think is worthy of putting, right now of saying comfortably belongs in the conversation for a dynasty asset in one quarterback. I'm not saying the rest of them are worthless. It's not what I'm saying. You can make a case for Tua to be up at least mentioned. You can make a case for a guy like Darnold. You could make a case for Cousins. They're all playable quarterbacks. I just don't see them as dynasty assets. They're all interchangeable pieces that I wouldn't mind throwing into a deal and getting the other one back. If I'm making a deal right now and you say, okay, you throw in Cousins and I'll throw in Tua, fine. I really don't give a fuck. They're two backup quarterbacks on my bench that play once a week, ideally once a week, 1 week per season until they're not a quarterback anymore. So I don't really care about the rest of these guys. I don't see them as being much more than a 16 to 17 point per game guy the rest of their career. You put Bryce Young in there, you put Michael Penix. I don't care who else you put in there. Going back to my C tier, Anthony Richardson, my God, he's the one who slid the most. I think we had him in the A tier in the middle as a top 8 or 10 quarterback, and I have him all the way outside my top 15 now, or at 14. He's just looked so bad. And like I had preached, he wasn't ready. He came out having attempted what? Had one full season as a starting quarterback in college. He had like a 50% completion rate. Yes, he was an athletic freak and a specimen, and he's only 20. How old is he? 22 and a half right now. So the only quarterbacks younger than him on this list are Drake May, and that's it. That's the only quarterback younger than him on the list is Drake May. But yet he shouldn't have been named a starter. He's come out multiple games and completed less than 50% of his passes. He has no play development, doesn't let plays develop in any doesn't go through progressions. He just doesn't look like a franchise quarterback. The offense unequivocally operates better with Joe Flacco running it. Not saying Joe Flacco is a better fantasy option, but my gosh, every player is better. And we've already seen it with the Carolina Panthers saying, yes, we know we need to develop Bryce Young, but we can't afford to let all of the rest of our developmental pieces, like your Xavier Legette, like your Jonathan Brooks, like even like a veteran like Deontay Johnson, or like even some of the linemen, it's a disservice to the rest of the team to let a guy like Bryce Young continue to struggle and bring down the rest of the offense and bring down the morale of the team. At some point, a head coach is going to say, we can't keep letting Richardson go out there and either airmail somebody or take off and run after 2 seconds because he refuses to look for, let Michael Pittman develop downfield, or let into the intermediate area, or try to hit Josh Downs on a timing route. Like, he would rather just tuck it and run it every time, which is great for fantasy, but not great for a long-term prospect. And yeah, I would obviously, when Richardson is healthy and in a decent matchup, I'm probably starting him over almost every quarterback on the list, except for the top maybe 7 or 8 quarterbacks. But to call him an asset is a stretch. Like, he's just looks so terrible, and the type of quarterback that I would not be surprised to see holding a clipboard this time next year. Other guys on this list I think deserve some recognition is Baker Mayfield. RIP Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. It's a shame because I think Baker Mayfield was truly on his way to putting up an MVP caliber season. I can't think of another player in the NFC that was more deserving of it so far. You could say Jane Daniels put up a great season, but Baker Mayfield is putting up one of the most prolific seasons not only he's put up, but we've ever seen. But man, losing Mike Evans and Chris Godwin is a huge, huge, huge hit to his stock as a fantasy asset, and just a hit to the Bucks in general. I don't know what they're going to do. Um, Obviously, you can't really sell on Baker now. I don't really have any advice what to do with him, but just wanted to shout out Baker. Dak definitely struggled, but I think we can lean on the fact that he's still good. There's clearly some problems in that Cowboys offense, and I think it stems from the lack of a running game. Like, Dowdle has looked average at best, and Zeke is no juice left. And I think that's offenses aren't worried about the threat of the run pick gashing them repeatedly for more than a couple yards, and they're able to kind of drop back into more softer coverages, and they're able to kind of double cover shadow CeeDee Lamb and force Dak to beat you with Jalen Tolbert and Jake Ferguson, who are good, but they're not dogs. And I think Dak's getting frustrated. CD's getting frustrated. That whole Cowboys fan base is getting frustrated. He's got that 4-year contract. He's stable. He's a stable asset. Hard for me to put him any lower than the C tier, but I'm holding Dak. I'm hoping he goes on a run like he did last year after his bye, and he starts putting up that MVP caliber second half where he's giving you those 25 to 40 point games every other week, and then still giving you that 17 to 20 point floor on his off games. So that being said, I'm at 45 minutes. So I'm gonna cut it off here. But it was awesome recording an episode with you guys. Hopefully you all listen. Shout out Dave. Love you, miss you, and Catch you guys in the next one.